The flashing lights pulled her over for no reason. Within minutes, a gun was aimed at Angela Carter's chest. She wasn't resisting, she wasn't breaking the law. She was one of the top FBI officials in Virginia, but to Officer Reynolds, she was just out of place. What happens when prejudice pulls the trigger before reason does? If this angers you, hit like and share, then follow the story to see how it ends. I was driving home the way I always do after a long day, quiet, steady, and alone with the hum of the engine. My name is Angela Carter, 42 Deputy Director at the FBI's Alexandria Field Office. But none of that matters much when the sun is melting into a pale gold line and the suburbs of Virginia are breathing out the last of their daylight. The road was nearly empty. A breeze combed through the tops of the oaks. Porch lights blinked on one by one like polite nods from a neighborhood settling in. It felt safe. It always does right up until it doesn't. I kept the silver sedan at an easy 35. Signal on before every turn. A slow roll over familiar potholes. I could have drawn this route with my eyes closed, down the long stretch past the church parking lot, over the little hill, where the street dips, then the left at the mailbox with the dented flag. It's the kind of drive that lets your shoulders drop and your chin unclench. Mine did for a while. My phone buzzed in the console. A text from my daughter, "Mom, are you close meatloaf's on the way into the oven?" "Don't be late." I smiled without meaning to. I typed back at the next light 10 minutes tops. Then I tucked the phone back the way I've told her I always do and reminded myself to breathe. Truth is, I've spent years walking into rooms where a wrong word can light the fuse. I've sat across from men who would rather burn the world than answer a simple question. But the thing that settles in my chest, the thing that never leaves, isn't an interrogation room or a raid plan. It's a traffic stop. It's the ordinary gone hostile in a blink. It's knowing that for people who look like me, the rules can be followed to the letter and still not save you. That habit you learn early never goes away. When I was a kid, my mother would rehearse it like we were saying, "Grace Dome, light on windows, down an inch, hands at 10 and 2, no sudden moves. Yes, sir. No, sir. Be clear. Be calm. Be small." It wasn't fear she was teaching. It was survival dressed up as manners. I thought about her as the sky thinned to lavender, and the first streetlight stuttered on above the median. I passed a couple walking a terrier that insisted on sniffing every leaf. A delivery van idled outside a townhouse. The wind scraped a soft hush across the hood, that kind of small sound you only hear when everything else is quiet. I felt my shoulders loosen another notch. Home was close enough to taste. The meatloaf would be too salty and too perfect, and my daughter would talk with her hands the way she does when she's excited. I pictured the three of us at the table, and for a moment the day finally felt finished. I checked my mirrors out of habit. Clean. The rear window held nothing but the receding twilight and a streak of cloud. I glanced at the speedometer. Still 35. My turn signal blinked a patient amber as I eased toward the next left. I watched for the mailbox with the dented flag for the little dip in the road that always makes the suspension sigh. The night didn't have teeth yet. It almost never does until it does. I was thinking about whether we had enough ketchup when the world behind me exploded into color red and blue, punching through the rear view bright enough to bleach the dashboard. The siren didn't howl so much as crack the air open, a single short burst that said, "Pull over now." My foot lifted and then settled. The brake lights washed the road a warm red. Instinct took the wheel before fear could. I signaled, drifted to the shoulder, eased in until gravel gritted under the tires. Dome light on, window down an inch, hands where they can see them, my mother's voice steady as an old hymn. I could feel my heart moving from my throat back into my chest like it remembered where it belonged. I told myself the facts: I wasn't speeding. I had signaled. My registration was current. The taillights worked, checked them last weekend. Facts are a kind of shelter if you hold them tight enough. I straightened my posture and put my palms at 10 and 2 fingers apart so nothing looked like a fist. The neighborhood hummed on as if none of it mattered. Televisions behind curtains, a garage door lifting somewhere to swallow a minivan, that terrier still arguing with the night. I heard footsteps on gravel, slow and heavy, pacing up alongside my car. I didn't turn. I watched them arrive in the mirror as a smudge of shadow and a white cone of flashlight cutting across my headrest. For a blink, I thought about my daughter's text and the meatloaf inching toward done. I thought about how many times I've told agents to trust their training. Then I did exactly that. Breathe in, breathe out, voice ready, hands still. The flashlight hit the glass with a tap like a metronome marking time, and I felt the wheel under my fingers go slick with the shine of my own palms. The night had changed, same street, same trees, same polite porch lights, but it had changed all the way down. You can always tell. It's the way the quiet gathers, the way the air goes thin. "Good evening, officer," I said, "because there are scripts we keep for a reason." My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else, someone calm and careful and sure of her footing. The reply didn't come yet. Just that light traveling the length of my arm, my shoulder, my face like a search party looking for trouble where there wasn't any. I kept my eyes forward, the mirror catching the pulse of red and blue like a heartbeat. I told myself again, I'm fine. I'm lawful. I'm almost home. Then the siren gave one more short, impatient bark, the kind that makes your nerves misfire even when you've braced for it, and my own heartbeat answered. I tightened my grip on the wheel. The leather pressed back real and present, the only solid thing in a moment that was suddenly too bright, too loud, and not nearly over. That's when I knew the night wasn't finished with me. Not yet. I slid the car fully onto the shoulder, clicked the hazard lights, and did what my mother's voice has trained into my bones. Dome light on window down a notch, hands at 10 and 2. Palms open, fingers spread, breathe. The interior glow turned the cabin into a kind of stage, and I knew exactly how I was supposed to move on it, slowly, clearly. Nothing that could be called sudden. Footsteps crunched up the gravel. I watched them arrive in the mirror first. Dark pants, a bright stripe, a belt that carried too much, and only then turned my eyes forward again. The flashlight found my face. A beat later, a man leaned into the edge of my open window, polite in that scripted way. "Evening," he said. "License and registration, please." His nameplate read Reynolds. He had that patrolman's smile I've seen 100 times thin, practiced not reaching the eyes. I kept my voice even and steady. "Good evening, officer. I'll get you what you need. Before I do, may I ask why I was stopped?" The smile thinned. The flashlight drifted down my forearms over the wheel back to my face. He didn't answer right away. Sometimes silence is the answer. I let 1 second pass. 2. "Your car looks out of place in this neighborhood," he said finally. Flat, like a rule he was reading off a card. I felt the words more than heard them. Out of place. It's the kind of phrase that cleans itself up for polite company and still stinks. I kept my eyes forward, my hands still. "I'm driving the limit," I said. 35 the whole way. I signaled at every turn. My registration is current. I can provide all of that." Reynolds shifted his weight, the beam of his light spilling across the dash and stuttering on the speedometer needle that still sat at 0. "License and registration," he repeated, cutting my explanation in half. "I'll reach for them now," I said, narrating my movements because that's the choreography that keeps you alive. "My license is in my wallet, right front bag on the passenger seat, registration in the glove box." He didn't acknowledge the courtesy. The flashlight hovered. I moved exactly as I said I would, slow, visible, no angles. The leather purse creaked. The wallet clicked open. The plastic of my license slid with a small sigh. I set it on the dash in the light, then reached for the glove box and eased it down. Paper rustled. I found the registration and insurance card, placed them next to the license. I waited. Reynolds didn't take them. The beam kept my eyes in its cone. I could feel heat rise along the cords of my neck, not anger, yet just the body-keeping score. "Officer," I said, letting each word land, "I'd still like to know the reason for the stop." He showed his teeth this time, but it wasn't a smile. "Your car, this street, late night, looks wrong. Looks wrong." How he drew back an inch, and the flashlight flicked over the back seat like he expected it to confess something. "You live here?" "Yes," I said. 10 minutes from here. I take this road every day." The wind moved through the trees above us, a dry whisper. Somewhere a screen door shut and locked. I could feel that familiar split inside me. The part that wants to end it and go home, and the part that refuses to shrink to fit someone's bias. I kept my voice measured. "I've complied. I have my license and registration ready. If there's a moving violation, tell me what it is. If not, please explain the stop." He lowered the beam until it burned a circle on my hands. "Ma'am, I asked for your papers. They're right there," I said, nodding at the documents laid out under the dome light. "You're welcome to take them." He didn't reach. Instead, his free hand came up. The knuckles met the glass just below the window cutout, one sharp, deliberate knock. The sound was small and loud at the same time, the way a hammer on a nail can be. Then he did it again. Harder. Tap. Thud. The second strike traveled through the metal of the door and into my ribs. It didn't crack anything. It didn't need to. The message came through fine. I control the rhythm here. My fingers tightened on the wheel and loosened again. I let the breath out slow. My mother's instructions lined up like stepping stones, clear, calm, small, but I am not a child anymore, and this is not a practice drill. Officer Reynolds. I said, careful to use his name, careful to keep respect in the shape of the sentence. Even if it didn't feel earned, the law requires reasonable suspicion to initiate a stop. Out of place is not a traffic offense. The air changed when I said it. Not much, just enough to make the hairs along my forearm stand. He angled himself closer to the window. "Is that so?" he said softly. "You a lawyer tonight, I'm a driver who knows her rights," I said. I didn't add anything else. The rest of it what I do for a living, who will answer if this goes sideways, stayed where it belonged for now. Another second passed. The street hummed the way streets do at night, electric faintly alive. The dome light hummed too. It's funny the things you hear when the big sounds haven't arrived yet. Reynolds rolled the flashlight in his palm, let the beam slide up the A-pillar over the roofliner down to my face again. "Step out of the vehicle," he said. "I don't feel safe doing that," I answered, still even. Not without a reason for the stop. His jaw worked. Then with the same hand that wasn't holding the flashlight, he reached to his belt and produced a baton, one of those collapsible numbers that snap out with a flick. He didn't extend it. He didn't have to. He brought it up and rapped the glass in a precise, angry rhythm. Thud, thud, thud. The sound went off like a small explosion in the quiet street, bouncing off siding and hedges and back at us. My pulse jumped. I could feel the steering wheel grow slick under my hands. In the corner of my eye, a curtain shifted in a nearby window, then stilled. That's the thing about escalation, it doesn't announce itself as a leap. It stacks word on word, gesture on gesture, until the weight is enough to crush something. He was stacking it on purpose. "Papers," he said again, voice harder now. "And don't test me. They're right in front of you," I said, and pushed them gently a few inches closer on the dash so he could take them, without me moving my hands from the wheel. "You can read the name, Angela Carter. Everything is current." He didn't look. The light held my eyes hostage. A smile not kind, not professional touched one corner of his mouth and was gone. "Your car looks out of place," he repeated, as if that settled it, as if those words could turn a neighborhood into a checkpoint. In the distance, a car rolled through the intersection and kept going, its engine note fading. I felt something inside me set its feet. Not stubbornness, not pride. Something older than both. "Officer," I said, "I've done everything by the book. If you can tell me a lawful reason for this stop, I'll step out. If you can't, I'm going to remain here with my hands visible." The baton tapped once more, hard enough to ring in my ears, hard enough to make the porch lights seem to twitch. The night swallowed the echo and gave us nothing back. That was the moment the temperature of the scene changed, though the air hadn't moved at all. You can hear it. You can feel it in the way your spine remembers to be straight. The polite script was over. What replaced it wasn't a conversation. It was a test, and we were both deciding how far we were willing to go. His patience snapped like a branch underfoot. Reynolds leaned closer, teeth grinding, his voice low and sharp enough to cut. "Hand me those papers right now, or I'll drag you out myself." The words landed heavy, heavier than the night air pressing in around us. My pulse jumped loud in my ears. My hands stayed tight on the wheel, but I felt the tremor slip into my fingers, the kind your body won't hide no matter how much your mind commands it. Still, my voice came out steady, practiced, like I'd trained it for this moment. "Officer, the law requires a valid reason for a stop. You haven't given one." His eyes narrowed, and in that glare, I saw the kind of arrogance that comes not from strength, but from habit. He was young, maybe late 20s, the shine still fresh on his badge, but his posture said he believed the uniform was armor. He carried himself like the patch on his chest, excused everything, like the belt full of steel, gave him authority no one could question. He wasn't seasoned, he was spoiled by power. A car hummed in the distance, then its headlights swept across the shoulder where I sat. For an instant, the beam lit the inside of my sedan, bright as a stage spotlight catching both my face and Reynolds' shadowed figure leaning into my window. The driver slowed, glanced, then kept rolling past. But I saw at the quick flick of their head, the eyes that caught enough to wonder. Just a second, but enough. Someone else had seen. Reynolds noticed too. His jaw tightened. He raised his baton again and smacked the door louder this time. Thud. The shock made me jump. My purse on the passenger seat slid an inch, and when I reached to steady it, my fingers fumbled, nearly dropping the wallet I'd set aside. I caught it heart-thumping breath hitching in my throat. Fear is a tricky thing. You can hide it in your tone, but your body tells on you. He leaned in closer, so close I could smell the tang of his aftershave under the weight of sweat in night air. His breath hit the edge of my face. His words came slow, deliberate, meant to bruise. People like you don't belong here. The sentence landed like a slap. Not shouted, not barked, but whispered with venom, the kind that poisons a neighborhood in silence. The kind that lingers in the walls long after the sound is gone. I felt the anger spark, hot, sharp, dangerous. Not the kind that makes you lash out, but the kind that stiffens your spine, makes your voice stronger, because you know if you bend now, you'll break for good. My knuckles pressed into the steering wheel, grounding me. The street itself seemed to still. Porch lights glowed steady but empty. That curtain that had shifted a block back was still again. Even the wind quieted, like it wanted to hear what would happen next. I didn't answer him right away. Sometimes silence is the loudest refusal you can give. He hated it. I could see it in the way his eyes flared. Then I said low and firm, I live here. I drive this road every day. I don't need your permission to belong. His baton tapped once more on the frame, clang, a warning disguised as rhythm. But that wasn't the sound that stayed with me. It was his words, thick with contempt, hanging in the night. People like you don't belong. That was the moment the whole scene shifted. It wasn't about paperwork anymore. It wasn't about safety or procedure or even the badge. It was about power being twisted, authority bent into a weapon. It was about me sitting in my own car on my own street and being told I didn't have the right to exist there. And the worst part, he meant every syllable. The gravel crunched under his boots as he straightened baton, resting against his thigh. He looked down at me like a king over his captive, sure the story would end, the way it always had for him, quiet, unchecked, unchallenged. But he didn't know who I was. And he didn't know this time somebody was watching. The night had tipped over into something else entirely, and I could feel it like the first rumble before a storm breaks. I made a decision that felt like stepping onto a narrow ledge. I'd narrate my movements and put a witness in the car with me. My phone is on the console, I said slow and clear. I'm going to reach for it with my right hand and place it on the mount. You can see both of my hands. I moved exactly as I said, no angles, no rush. The plastic edge of the phone kissed my palm. I brought it up where the dome light could see it, where he could see it, and slid it into the dash mount until it clicked. One tap and the camera filled with my own face, damp at the hairline, eyes steady because I needed them to be. Another tap and the video started rolling. A small red dot began to pulse in the corner of the screen, soft and insistent like a heartbeat. Officer Reynolds, I said, keeping my tone even. This interaction is being recorded. For half a breath, something in him hesitated. It wasn't remorse. It wasn't fear. It was calculation, the mind of a man who likes to perform his power, suddenly aware of an audience. The baton lowered an inch. His jaw unclenched. Then the mask slid back on. He smirked. That camera won't save you. The words came out casual, almost lazy, like he was commenting on the weather. But they were a threat, the kind some men deliver with a shrug because they've gotten away with it long enough to turn menace into habit. The red dot kept blinking. I could hear the phone pick up the faint hum of the dome light, the far-off thrum of a transformer. It caught everything because that's what truth does when you let it. I looked into the lens, past my reflection, past the shine on my own cheek, to the idea of whoever might watch this later. My daughter's face flashed in my head, not the picture in my office, but the real one, hair escaping a ponytail, impatience in the way she taps the counter when she's hungry. Meatloaf's in. Don't be late. The text read like a dare now. Be safe. Come home. Show up at the table and pretend the world is kinder than it is. My left hand stayed welded to the wheel. My right settled back beside it, fingers splayed for the camera and for the man outside my window. The tremor came again, small, unwanted, honest. I didn't fight it. Fear doesn't make you weak. It makes you accurate. It tells you where the edges are. The neighborhood offered nothing to break the moment. Wind sifted through the sycamores, a dry hiss over bark. Somewhere 2 streets over a garage door rattled shut. The air between us went tight as wire. Even the patrol car's engine seemed to hold its breath. Officer, I said, I've complied. My documents are visible. I'm not stepping out unless you can tell me a lawful reason for this stop. He set the baton against the door again, not with a blow this time, but with a deliberate weight as if measuring me with it. The flashlight, still in his other hand, cut a bright circle across my knuckles, climbed to my wrist, lingered at my watch face like it could accuse the time of something. You think that badge in your wallet makes you special? He asked, the smirk gone. The voice dipped low. You think some video's going to change how this goes? I didn't look at my bag. I didn't say anything about any badge. The red dot answered for me, patient and blinking. I see you. I see this. I think facts matter, I said. And I think people watching matter. He angled his head a small tilt that read as challenge. People like who? I let that hang. Names don't fix a thing like this. Accountability does. His posture changed, then a tiny shift forward, less than an inch, but enough to crowd the window with his presence. Keep pushing, he murmured, and the baton came alive, not in a strike, but in a slow drag along the edge of the glass. The sound was a low scrape, almost intimate, and it turned my nerves to glass. He was testing the barrier the way a wolf tests a fence, curious, patient, confident he could find the weak place. The camera saw it all. The red dot pulsed. I kept breathing in counts 4 and 6 out the way I teach new agents when their hands shake in their first field exercise. My mother's old instructions braided with my own. Lights on, hands visible, words measured. Record everything. I'm not resisting, I said. I'm cooperating within the law. I'm also documenting what's happening. That protects both of us. He laughed a single dry note and leaned close enough that the beam haloed his cheek. Protects you, he said. I don't need protecting. I thought not for the first time how wrong some men can be about safety, how they mistake power for immunity and authority for character. I didn't say any of that. The lens didn't need my opinion, it needed the truth. Last time he said each word bitten off. Step out of the car. I don't feel safe doing that. I replied, eyes forward, hands steady in the light. State the reason for the stop, and I will comply. His teeth showed not a smile. The baton lifted a fraction. For an instant, I braced for the slam, the crack of tempered glass giving way. Instead, he let the tip fall with a single heavy rap. Thud. The sound went off like a gunshot in the quiet street. A porch light across the way flicked on. A shape moved behind a curtain and froze. The patrol car's radio hissed and then fell silent again. The little red dot kept blinking, unbothered by drama, unafraid to wait. My heart tried to surge. I pressed it back with breath and made my voice smaller, more precise, the way you do when a situation demands you be both witness and participant. Officer Reynolds, for the record, you failed to provide a lawful reason for this stop. I am remaining in my vehicle with my hands visible. I am recording for our mutual safety. He stared at me like he wanted those words to be softer than they were, or louder, either way, something he could use. When I didn't give him what he wanted, his face went flat. Keep it up, he said. The G in his next word was a growl. Keep resisting and see what happens. I swallowed once, not from doubt, but to clear the taste of metal from my mouth. I'm not resisting, I repeated and let the camera hold the proof. He shifted his grip on the baton. The flashlight beam trembled over my hands and steadied again. The wind lifted and dropped a quiet hand on the trees. Time stretched thin. Then he leaned in, voice close enough to fog the edge of the glass, the words meant to land inside my skin. Keep this up, he said, each syllable heavy. Keep challenging me, and you'll find out exactly what happens. The line wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The threat wasn't in the volume. It was in the certainty. The red dot pulsed on unblinking, and I understood this was the line before the fall, the last inch of ground before gravity takes over. He moved before the sound reached me. 1 second, the baton hovered at the edge of the window. The next, his hand dropped to his hip and metal flashed under the streetlight. The motion was practiced, no fumbling, no doubt just the clean, rehearsed draw of a man who believes the quickest answer wins. The gun cleared the holster and found me like it had been looking for me all night. The barrel was a dark, simple circle. It's strange what your brain clings to when time thins out, not the size of the weapon, not the weight of his hand, just that black mouth centered over my chest. The whole world narrowed to a dot that said now. Everything else went quiet. The patrol car's radio faded, the trees held their breath, even the phone's tiny red light seemed to blink slower. The only sound I could hear with any clarity was my own air scraping in and out, heart knocking against bone, the small tremor in my fingers, skating across the leather of the wheel. I didn't cry, not exactly, but my eyes burned and vision does what it wants with that edge's gilded light smeared the kind of shine that makes the world look either holy or dangerous. I saw my daughter as if she'd stepped into the passenger seat, one knee tucked under elbow on the door, rolling her eyes when I say, helmet, like I always do, even on a perfect day. Meatloaf's in, don't be late. It landed in my chest like a plea. Be late if you have to, I answered her in my head. Just be here. Just be anywhere but a story someone tells at work tomorrow. Out of the car. Now! His voice had lost the lazy edges. It came tight and bright, pitched to break nerves. Get out or I will shoot. I felt the command skitter across me, looking for purchase. It found fear, yes, it always does. But fear is not the same as surrender. It sharpened me. It made every part of the scene tally up the camera, recording the dome light washing my hands, the documents on the dash, the porch light flicked on across the street, the single shadow behind a curtain that had not moved since the baton-wrapped glass. I took those facts in and made a small shelter out of them. Officer, I said, and I could hear the tremor try to climb into the word. I pinned it with breath and went on. Pointing a firearm at a compliant driver without cause is unlawful. I am not exiting the vehicle without a stated legal reason for this stop. He widened his stance, 1 foot back, 2 hands on the grip muzzle steady. The flashlight had fallen away. There was nothing left between us but aim. I kept my gaze soft, not on the barrel, not on his eyes, but a little to the right, where the A-pillar meets the dash, a place to keep my focus from looking like a challenge. You think you're in charge, he snapped. Spit clipped the word charge into something meaner. You think that camera changes the fact that I told you to get out? I think the law does, I said. The truth is a stubborn thing, and sometimes it sounds quiet when it's strongest. He barked a laugh that wasn't laughter. Torna sekra. The gun didn't waver. This is my stop. That sentence told me everything I needed to know about the story he was trying to write, the one where I was the problem and he was the solution to it. I've read that story before. I've had to tear it up more times than I can count. I wasn't going to let him bind me into it now. I let my breath come in counts again, 4 and 6 out, and heard the numbers stack like rungs I could climb. The phone caught the rise and fall of my chest. The red dot pulsed. I could feel the wheels stitching under my thumbs, each tiny bump a proof of contact with something solid. Officer Reynolds, I said, putting his name into the air like a pin on a map. For the record, I am not resisting. I am complying within the law. You have not provided a lawful basis for the stop. You are pointing a firearm at my chest. This is being recorded. Get out. His jaw flexed. Last warning. He wanted movement, any movement that he could turn into a reason. He wanted my hands to leave the wheel, my eyes to dart to the bag, my voice to spike. I gave him exactly none of that. I gave him stillness. A car idled at the far corner, engine note low, then rolled on. The porch across the street stayed lit. The curtain did not shift. The world was watching in small ways, and sometimes that's enough to keep a line from being crossed. Sometimes it isn't. I have lived long enough to know both truths can be real at once. The fear didn't leave. It doesn't. It sat with me heavy and intimate like an unwelcome guest you refuse to entertain. I let it talk and didn't answer. I kept my hands where they belonged and my face where the lens could see it. You have my documents, I said, though I knew he hadn't taken them. You can run them. You can issue a citation if there's a violation. You cannot escalate further without cause. His eyes flicked for a fraction toward the dash, toward my license. The registration, the insurance card lined up like little shields under the light. When they came back to me, the anger had sharpened into something smaller and meaner. You don't tell me can or cannot, he said. I tell you. The gun inched closer, not a full extension, just enough to make the space between barrel and sternum a matter you could measure with breath. I gave him no more of mine than I had to. Officer, I said, if you fear for your safety, call a supervisor. We can wait. The suggestion landed like a dare. He heard supervisor and bristled as if the word itself were an insult. Men like him fold rank into identity until any request for oversight feels like theft. His finger settled harder on the trigger guard. 1, he said. 2, he wanted me counting with him. I didn't. I counted my own, my mother's voice, my training, my daughter's text, the red dot. 4 truths, each one a stake in the ground. 3, the number hung there, mean and empty. Nothing moved. Not me. Not him. The only thing that moved stubborn and small was the pulse in my throat and the blink of the camera doing the job I'd asked it to do. You are violating the law, I said, and heard the steadiness return to my tone, a line I could stand on. And you are on video. For the first time since the weapon came out, something flickered behind his eyes' annoyance. Doubt, the awareness that some acts don't stay owned once light touches them. It didn't drop the muzzle. It didn't soften the moment, but it bent it just enough to make room for the next choice to be something other than disaster. The night didn't unclench. The danger didn't back away. My chest still felt like a door someone was pounding from the inside, but I had given the moment its record and given myself a ground to stand on. Sometimes at the edge of a fall, that's the only leverage you get. And sometimes it's enough to keep you upright until help arrives or until the man with the gun learns he isn't the only one writing the story. I decided to change the shape of the moment. Not the volume, not the stance, just the shape. My phone is on the mount, I said, keeping my hands where he could see them and where the camera already did. I'm going to touch the screen with my right index finger and make a call to your supervisor. You can watch every inch of my hand. The muzzle didn't blink. Neither did the little red dot. I moved exactly as announced, one finger slow, as a second hand tapping the screen, sliding to the contacts I knew by muscle memory. The screen brightened, painting my knuckles in a cold light. I scrolled to the name I wanted and pressed. Captain Thomas Miller, I said for the record, the way you do when you're building a clear chain of what happened and when. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times long enough for him to think I was bluffing. Sheriff's office, a voice answered, gruff and awake. Miller. Captain, I said, and made sure the lens had my face, my hands, the angle of the gun. This is Angela Carter, Deputy Director, FBI, Alexandria. I'm on Route 7 shoulder, just past mile marker 12. I've been stopped without cause. An officer named Reynolds is pointing a firearm at my chest. I am recording. Silence, then the sound of a chair scraping a floor, paperwork sliding. Deputy Director Carter, he said, crisp now. Are you safe at this second? I glanced at the barrel, then back to the A-pillar, so my eyes wouldn't look like a challenge. I'm stable, I said, but he is still aimed, and I have not been given a lawful reason for the stop. Units are en route, Miller said. Stay put. Keep your hands visible. Officer Reynolds, if you're hearing me. His voice lifted, not a shout, but an order built to travel. Holster your weapon immediately. Reynolds jerked like a wire had been plucked under his skin. The gun bobbed just a breath, a tremor crossing from his wrist into the steel. His eyes snapped to the phone. The mask he'd been wearing all night, authority without anchor, cracked hairline thin. You're FBI, he said. The word arrived in pieces as if his mouth didn't want to give it the honor of a single breath. Yes, I said, because this was the moment to put the truth in the center of the room. I didn't flash a credential. I didn't need to. I let the calm in my tone do the work. Deputy Director Angela Carter. You have my name in front of you. You can verify it any way you like. He didn't look at the license on the dash. He looked at me, and it wasn't the look of a man recalculating policy. It was the look of a man colliding with consequence. His stance wavered, knees softening a fraction. The muzzle dipped, then steadied again, pride yanking it back up like a leash. The phone speaker carried Miller's voice into the night, clear and close as if he were standing at my window. "Officer, you are to de-escalate now. You are on a recorded line. You are on camera. Holster your weapon and state your reasonable suspicion, or disengage and await supervision." A flush climbed Reynolds' throat. He shot a glance at his cruiser as if it might offer a different set of orders. It didn't. The static on his radio made a short, embarrassed hiss and died. The gun wobbled again only a millimeter, but when you're watching a barrel measure the distance to your sternum, a millimeter is a mile. "Don't play games with me," he said, but the sentence lacked the iron he'd been swinging. "People lie about who they are all the time." "Then verify," I said. "Call it in. Spell my name. Ask for Captain Miller's confirmation. We can stand here in the light together while you do." He swallowed. The tendons in his neck stood up like wires pulled taut. This wasn't doubt about facts. This was the war between ego and gravity, the part of him that knew he'd stepped off a ledge, and the part that refused to admit the ground was rising to meet him. I let the camera have a clean angle of my face, then of my hands, steady now, because there's a particular kind of steadiness that comes when the truth has witnesses. "Captain," I said into the phone, "I am maintaining position. My hands are visible. I have stated my compliance and the lack of cause. The weapon remains pointed. Please confirm units ETA." 3 minutes, Miller said. "Stay on the line." Reynolds heard the number and flinched. 3 minutes isn't long, not for a cool head. It's an eternity if your power depends on nobody else arriving. He took a half step back, then forward again, like a boxer unsure whether to dance or commit. "Lower the weapon," I said, not loud, not pleading, just a line laid on the ground. "This doesn't have to get worse." He stared as if he could force me to take the words back with his eyes alone. The gun did not lower, but it didn't climb either. It hung there, the world's ugliest punctuation mark, keeping the sentence from ending. Behind him, the neighborhood breathed in a tremor, the way people do when they don't want to be seen watching. A porch light blinked off, then on again. A car eased to a stop at the corner, and parked headlights dyeing the silhouette of a driver turned toward us. I saw that, and I let him see that I saw it, the audience growing, the narrative slipping out of his hands. "You called your boss," he said, "and it wasn't an accusation so much as a complaint. You think that makes you better than this, better than me?" "It makes me accountable," I said. "It gives both of us a clean record of the truth. That should make you safer too." He didn't want safety, not the kind that comes from rules anyway. He wanted victory. He wanted a story where the end was his to write. The gun trembled a little more, and for the first time I could hear his breath ragged at the edges, anger braided with something that sounded uncomfortably like fear. Officer Reynolds Miller's voice cut in firmer, closer sirens, now faint in the background, a thread of sound pulling the scene toward resolution. "Stand down. Backup is seconds out. Do not escalate. Holster your weapon." The sirens grew not a wail but a promise. Blue and red touched the far end of the street, soft at first, then brightening as they rounded the bend. The camera caught the color as it crawled along the edge of my windshield. The relief that wanted to flood me stayed where I put it, behind my ribs, behind the discipline that had kept me intact this long. I met his eyes and held them, not with challenge, but with the simple insistence of a person who refuses to disappear. "Captain Miller is on the line. Units are arriving. My name and status are on record. Lower the weapon." The barrel dipped a hair. He clenched his jaw and brought it back up as if pride were a pulley he could operate by will alone. The cruiser lights turned the asphalt into a river of color. Tires hissed to a stop behind his car. Doors opened. Footsteps. Voices. "Holster Miller," said again. And this time the word wasn't a request carried on a phone. It was an order arriving with bodies and badges, and the end of solitude. Reynolds blinked hard like a man waking up angry. The gun hung there between us, a last shaky argument. Then his wrist twitched and the muzzle ticked down 2 inches, nothing. Everything still aimed, still wrong, but no longer locked on my heart with the certainty it had a minute before. I kept my hands on the wheel. I kept my breath counted. I kept the record clean. My fear didn't leave. It simply made room for resolve to stand beside it. This is what a reversal looks like up close, not a trumpet blast, not a clean fade to black. It's a stubborn man realizing he isn't the only author in the scene, and a woman deciding to speak in a voice steady enough that the camera can carry it into whatever comes next. The sound came first, sirens curling through the trees, bouncing off the houses, rolling up the quiet street like a storm that had been waiting all night to arrive. Blue and red lights spilled across the pavement, cutting through the pale glow of my dome light, painting the silver hood of my sedan in violent color. My chest rose just once with the knowledge that help had reached me. But the gun was still there, black and unwavering, and the man holding it wasn't ready to let go. A sheriff's SUV skidded to a halt behind Reynolds' cruiser. Doors flew open. Boots hit gravel, hard, purposeful. Captain Thomas Miller strode forward, shoulders squared, voice already carrying the command that filled the space between us. "Reynolds, holster your weapon right now." The authority in his tone cracked the night clean in two. But Reynolds didn't flinch the way I expected. Instead, he jerked the gun tighter into his grip, turning slightly toward the new threat, his face contorted with fury and something that looked an awful lot like desperation. "She wouldn't comply," he shouted, voice breaking over the words. "She's resisting, Captain. I was doing my job." The muzzle wavered between me and the space beyond, swinging like a pendulum, measuring his fear. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I forced my voice to find the air. "That's a lie," I yelled, not out of panic, but to make sure every ear in the night caught it. "I've cooperated from the start." He never gave a reason for this stop, only his bias. The words cut and they hung there undeniable. The deputies spilling from the SUV froze in formation, hands resting on their holstered weapons, waiting for Miller's cue. The scene had turned into a standoff, one man shaking with rage, one woman locked in place, with her palms open, and a captain who knew a single wrong note could collapse it all. Miller raised a hand, sharp and steady, signaling his deputies to draw, but hold. Pistols cleared, leather aimed, but disciplined sights locking on Reynolds. The air thickened, bristling with the sound of safeties clicking off. Mark Miller barked, using his first name now. His voice dropped into something colder. "This isn't procedure. This isn't control. This is reckless endangerment. Lower. The gun." Reynolds' chest heaved, his breathing shallow and ragged. His pride screamed louder than the sirens. "You can't humiliate me like this," he roared. "Not in front of her. Not in front of everyone." The weapon trembled, his knuckles pale against the grip, his stance unraveling inch by inch. Sweat ran down his temple, catching in the flashing blue before falling. He was cornered, and he knew it. But sometimes a cornered man is the most dangerous kind. I kept my voice steady, though my throat ached from holding down the fear. "You're not the victim here, Reynolds. You pointed a gun at me for no reason. That's the truth, and it's all on camera." He turned his eyes on me, then wide, burning, refusing to accept the weight of what he'd done. His mouth twisted. "You," he shook the word loose. "You're the reason I'm standing here like this. You think you're better. You think you can break me." The barrel shook. Every deputy on the line stiffened, fingers pressing tighter on their triggers. One heartbeat too long, and I thought I'd hear the shot that would split everything open. Miller didn't wait for that heartbeat to break. He moved, fast, precise, like a man who's ended standoffs before they turned into tragedies. His boots pounded the gravel, his hand a blur, as he lunged for Reynolds' wrist. "Enough," Miller barked. The world exploded in motion, metal clanging as the gun smacked against the side of my car. A grunt torn from Reynolds' chest as Miller twisted his arm, the crack of cuffs snapping open from a deputy's belt. "Let it go!" Mark Miller's voice roared through the struggle. Reynolds fought back with raw pride, not strength, jerking and snarling like a man drowning in his own fury. But Miller was older, heavier, and he had the kind of authority that came from both rank and resolve. He forced the weapon down, pried the fingers loose one by one until the pistol clattered onto the asphalt. The deputies closed in. Hands grabbed Reynolds' shoulders, his arms. The click of steel shackling his wrists rang loud and final. He sagged, breathing like an animal, caught his chest heaving against the hold of the cuffs. For the first time all night, the gun wasn't part of the story anymore. I let my breath come shaky but real. My palms slid a fraction on the wheel where sweat had gathered. My eyes stung, but I held them open because the camera needed this too. Reynolds twisted in their grip, his head snapping back toward me. His eyes locked on mine, fever bright, full of the venom that no set of cuffs could wash away. "You'll pay for this," he spat, voice low but sharp enough to cut through the night. "You hear me? You'll pay." The words weren't loud, but they carried all the way into the silence that followed, as if the night itself wanted me to remember them. And I did. Because sometimes the scariest part isn't the weapon, it's the promise a man makes when he's lost everything and refuses to accept it. The courthouse in Arlington was never meant to hold this much heat. Every bench was filled, the aisles packed, cameras jostling at the back, reporters whispering into recorders. Uniformed officers lined the walls, their faces stiff, while ordinary citizens leaned forward as if justice itself might slip away if they blinked. I sat at the front, steady in posture, if not in pulse. Across the aisle, Reynolds hunched in his suit, no badge, no weapon, just a man waiting to be measured. The judge gave a nod and the screen lit up. My dashboard camera filled the room larger than life. The scene played, the dome light glowing my hands at 10, and Reynolds' voice rising, the steel flash of his weapon aimed directly at my chest. The sound of his baton on the door cracked through the speakers, then his words, "People like you don't belong here." The air went heavy. You could hear people shift a throat, clear the faint hum of the projector. But no one spoke. They just watched the barrel of a gun centered over me, as if it were centered over all of them. The defense rose fast, eager to puncture the silence. Reynolds' lawyer adjusted his tie, voice sharp, trying to cut through the weight of the image. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you see is not the whole story." My client was provoked. The driver refused lawful orders, escalated the situation, and I felt my jaw tighten, but I kept still. The lawyer pressed on, words tumbling in a rush. "Furthermore, this video is suspicious. The angles, the edits, how do we know it hasn't been doctored? If evidence is compromised, it cannot be trusted." Murmurs rippled. For a moment, doubt edged into the corners of the room like smoke. The lawyer saw it and pushed harder. This so-called deputy director wasn't calm. She was confrontational. She baited my client, who only acted as any officer would when his safety was threatened. I moved to dismiss this video as evidence. The judge leaned back, eyes narrowed, weighing. My chest clenched. It was one thing to face a gun in the dark. It was another to face the chance that truth might be scrubbed clean in daylight. I reminded myself to breathe, but the knot inside me didn't loosen. The prosecutor countered, calm but clipped. "This video is time-stamped, continuous, unbroken. It shows compliance from the driver at every turn." The only escalation came from Officer Reynolds. The judge nodded but said nothing yet. The jury shifted in their seats. For the first time since that night, I wondered if maybe silence could betray me, if the defense's smoke and mirrors might blur what was plain as day. Then came the twist. A witness was called, a fellow officer, one who had spoken in Reynolds' defense during the investigation. He took the stand, stiff-backed eyes darting between the floor and the jury. His testimony started rehearsed, every word pressed flat. Reynolds believed he was in danger. He acted within training. The defense lawyer leaned in with satisfaction, but the prosecutor stepped forward. "Let's roll the second angle," she said. The screen flickered again. This time it was grainy footage from a dash camera of a passing driver, the same headlights I had seen sweep across me that night. It caught Reynolds leaning in baton, striking his gun drawn. It caught my voice level and clear, narrating compliance, stating the law. The witness froze, his lips pressed thin. The jury stared at him, waiting. His shoulders dropped, and for the first time he looked straight at me. "I can't deny what's on that video," he said quietly. I wanted to believe he was right, but he wasn't. A hush fell. Then the silence broke, not with words, but with the collective exhale of people realizing the ground had shifted. That's when Eleanor Johnson rose from the gallery. She was older, with a scarf at her throat, her voice trembling, but strong. "My grandson was stopped like that," she said, her words cracking open the room. No camera, no proof, just his word against theirs. This isn't a one-off. This is every day for folks who look like us. The gallery stirred. A woman dabbed her eyes. A man muttered agreement. Then voices rose, not chaotic, but unified, low at first, then swelling. "That's right. Enough is enough." The judge pounded the gavel for order, but the tide had already turned. Finally, Captain Thomas Miller took the stand. His uniform seemed heavier than usual, the weight of the badge sitting differently on his chest. His voice, though, carried no hesitation. "Reynolds was wrong," he said, each syllable clipped. "He didn't just endanger a civilian, he endangered a deputy director of the FBI. He embarrassed this department. He betrayed what it means to wear this uniform. and for that I apologize on behalf of my unit and myself." The words landed like hammer strikes. Even the defense lawyer faltered, his pen slipping from his hand. The jury leaned forward, eyes fixed on Miller's steady posture. And then the room erupted. Applause burst from the gallery, from citizens who had carried too many untold stories in their bones, from officers who understood that silence would shame them too. It rolled through the chamber like thunder, hands clapping, voices rising, the sound of a community taking the side of truth. The judge banged the gavel again, stern, but even he couldn't crush the sound. For the first time since that night, I let my hands unclench in my lap. The tide was no longer uncertain. The weight was shifting, heavy and undeniable, all of it pressing toward justice. The jury didn't take long. 6 hours of deliberation, then the foreman stood, paper trembling, only slightly in his hand. The judge asked for the verdict, and the words rang out like the crack of a gavel, themselves guilty on all counts. Abuse of power, endangerment, violation of civil rights. Reynolds's face went slack, then hard, then twisted into something neither contrition nor shock could explain. The sentence followed quickly: 3 years in state prison, no parole, and a lifetime ban from ever wearing a badge again. For a man who had treated his uniform like armor, the punishment was a stripping bare. The deputies moved in cuffs, snapping around his wrists, cold and final. The sound echoed in the courtroom the way the baton had echoed against my car door that night. As they pulled him toward the exit, he twisted once more to face me, eyes wild, voice raised not in plea but in venom. "You won't change anything," he shouted, straining against the hold. "This system is bigger than you. You'll never win." The words landed like a curse, not just on me, but on everyone listening. They carried a truth he wanted to weaponize, that prejudice is stubborn, that power resists correction. But they also revealed his fear. Men who believe they are invincible don't scream about defeat. The press seized on the story instantly. Headlines unfurled across front pages and news feeds: FBI Deputy Director survives racially motivated stop. Gun drawn without cause, officer convicted. Evening broadcasts replayed the video on loop frame, by frame the barrel aimed at my chest, becoming an emblem of what millions already knew too well. On social media, the case ignited like dry grass. People flooded timelines with their own memories of being pulled over for no reason, taillights that weren't broken, speeds that weren't exceeded, neighborhoods where they looked out of place. Hashtags trended overnight, voices rising not in chaos, but in chorus. This happens every day. This time someone powerful had proof. Some posts were angrier than anything the courtroom had heard. Others were weary confessions. Nurses stopped after double shifts. Teenagers questioned walking home. Veterans humiliated in their own driveways. The comments weren't abstract. They were lived. And they stretched across race, gender, and age, the common thread being the sting of being presumed guilty by a glance. In the swirl of coverage, one voice stood out. Frank Doyle, a retired officer with 30 years behind the badge, white-haired, white-skinned, the kind of man the public still associates with steady service. He spoke plainly on a local news panel. "Not every cop is Mark Reynolds," Doyle said. His eyes were steady, not defensive, but resolute. "But every good cop knows one thing: justice rots if we let men like him wear the same badge we do. If the system doesn't clean itself, the public loses faith, and once faith is gone, law has no weight. We've got to root this out from the inside." Those words traveled further than he probably expected. Clips of his statement spread across the networks, across feeds, shared not just for what he said, but for who was saying it. A white former cop calling for reform struck chords that statistics and protests alone couldn't reach. People quoted him, debated him, but most importantly, they listened. For me, his words did more than comfort. They carved out a small space of hope in a week drowned in venom and doubt. It reminded everyone that accountability isn't just demanded from the outside, it can be claimed from within. That was the mini-climax of its own, a recognition that even inside a flawed system, there were voices willing to break rank for truth. When Reynolds's shouts faded into the clatter of chains and closing doors, the story didn't end. It was only beginning its life in the public square, on screens in kitchens, at bus stops, in whispered warnings and louder promises. And while his words, "You'll never change anything," echoed in my head, they were quickly drowned out by another echo born from the crowd, from the community, from Frank Doyle's simple vow, justice must be clean from the inside. And in that moment, even after fear and fury, I believed there was still a chance it could be. 6 months later, Virginia turned a hard night on Route 7 into law. The governor signed a bill requiring every officer to wear body cameras and allowing random audits of traffic stops. Cameras flashed and reporters crowded the marble steps, but Angela Carter stood calm behind the signing table. No triumphant smile, only quiet resolve. She knew a signature wasn't the end. It was a promise that needed guarding. Later that week, she met neighbors in a crowded Arlington community hall. Folding chairs creaked as people leaned forward to hear her speak. From the front row, a teenage boy stepped up with an envelope. Inside, in looping blue ink, were simple words: "You gave me hope. I can drive one day and not be afraid. You prove people can fight back and win." Angela read the letter twice, her throat tightening. She saw her younger self in that boy, wide-eyed, wanting to believe the world could change. "This is why we keep going," she told the room. "Justice isn't a headline. It's a habit we practice every day." At home that evening, she placed the letter in the same drawer where she kept family memories. It wasn't evidence anymore. It was a seed of what comes next. The night on Route 7 would never leave her: the sudden siren, the gun's dark circle, the threat of silence. But those memories now stood beside new ones of voices rising in court of a law, past of a boy daring to dream of safe roads. Angela's final words to the crowd still lingered in conversations across the state: justice is not a single moment. It's a journey we build together. Each of us has a piece of the work every day in every choice. That is the true legacy of what happened on Route 7, not fear or anger, but proof that truth once spoken and recorded can move from one heart to thousands. And that's where this story leaves us, with a reminder that justice isn't just about one courtroom or one night on a dark road. It's about all of us standing together, refusing to let fear or prejudice decide who belongs. Angela's courage showed that the truth can still cut through the noise, and that every voice matters when it comes to change. If this story moved you, take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to Mr. Mac's Stories for more powerful tales like this one. Your support means the world to us. It gives our team the strength to keep creating meaningful stories that shine a light where it's most needed. Let's carry this memory forward together as part of the community we've built here at Mr. Mac's Stories. That's our symbol, our promise, and our mission.